Hello everyone, my name is Elaine and welcome to Divergent Thinking and Iteration Process. So before I start, this is not working. Okay. It will work, I promise. Oh, just quick thank you to the GCAP team for hosting this wonderful event, and also to Film Victoria for supporting me in travels. As you can probably hear from my accent, I am not from Australia. I'm from Montreal, Canada. From the French side of the country, you've seen some of my colleagues this week. And so just want to check if everyone is almost in teams. So I have asked that you all group together because later on we're going to move into some exercises, and I do want you to work in groups. So what we're going to go through today, so just so you know, this is a 2-hour commitment. It is totally okay if you must leave. I will not be insulted. But so we'll go through a bit of theory on what is divergent thinking and some learning methods, but then move into 5 exercises. Those are the handouts that you have. And then I do also want you to share what you will be doing later on. So, a little bit about me. I am a game designer. I've been playing games for as long as I can remember, like probably most of you, but I never actually thought I would be making games. I initially studied ancient languages, mythology, and linguistics. It doesn't actually give you a job. Well, I studied at McGill University back in Montreal. I worked in book publishing for about 8 years and slowly moved into making games. At the time, I actually thought it was just a hobby, and I slowly became more and more familiar with indie games. I kind of found a home with that community. And I actually went back to school when I was about 30. I completed a master's in game design, and I focused specifically on social features and communications in game. So today, I work with Studio Artifact 5. I don't know if you know them. They released a game called Anamorphine last year. I didn't actually work on that game, but you should check it out. I also am a coordinator for Pixels. It is a gender diversity and women in game initiative. I specifically run our game incubator. It's a 6-week workshop where we help more women create their first video game. Super happy to talk about it after the presentation if you want. And finally, this is my daughter. She's almost 4. She's very cute. There's a reason why she's in there, not just because I love her. And it's exactly related to both the theme of the conference, but also the topic of this presentation. When I first heard the theme for GCAP this year, it really resonated strongly with me. I've been thinking and researching how and where we get our inspiration a lot in the last few years. And to me, the answer was my daughter. There is obviously the question of leaving a positive legacy, but past that, there's how we actually can learn from how kids do things. I've given talks in the past about this, including at GameDev.world last June, and that's where I started thinking about what we're going to be talking today. When I first learned I was expecting a kid, what I did, I started researching. So as a game designer, I do start with research. I want to do what exists, what other people have done, what are the lessons that they've learned, and basically try to do everything perfectly. If I can learn what others have done wrong, maybe I can do it right. More specifically, I started researching how kids learn and how they go through their development. And that's where I learned about the notion of divergent thinking. This was more specifically about learning methods and schooling. I was trying to understand child development better, and it really hit me. There are correlations between natural learning and design process, and I'm a very firm believer that we can learn lessons from how kids evolve that are both good for design but also production. So through these lessons, I have changed massively the way I work. That's kind of what I want to show you today. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to give you a revolution in what you do, but I hope to give you some new tricks and exercises that you can bring back. Maybe just as show of hands, what type of roles do you have? Do we have designers here? Audio? Production, producers? Yes. Artists? Marketing? Yeah, wonderful. Okay, cool. I do think we can learn from each other and also apply these types of exercises to any fields, although it is a little bit more focused on design. So, I've already dropped a few concepts that probably require some definition, so I apologize in advance for the very wordy slides that are coming ahead. So, natural learning is an educational method based on the idea that learners acquire knowledge and skills through direct life experiences, including play, experimentation, and social interactions, instead of through a predefined curriculum. This is naturally how toddlers and preschool children learn. They start with imitation, they'll mimic adults and older kids around them, and then they'll slowly move into experimentation and eventually develop their own personal skills. So, why do kids do that? So for most, if not all preschool children, creative play comes extremely easily. Children are just used to look at objects for what they can be instead of what they were defined to be. It's in huge part because they are still experimenting with the possibilities they face before determining their optimal use. And sometimes it's a little surprising. I don't know if you have done those kinds of games when you were kids, but have you ever turned a box into a rocket ship? I have. I wish I could still do it. As adults, we have become less inclined to playful and creative thinking. Basically, we started looking at objects for their defined purpose instead of the possibilities that lie within them. So, what happened between the time we were kids and now? So I've actually dropped it a few times. School has a huge part to play in this. So I'm not saying school is bad or in that you shouldn't send the kids to school. In the school environment, we tend to forget about fantasy and creativity. And there is a specific reason for that. When we start learning skills, the approach that are brought to us focus on presenting a problem and teaching one proven solution to reach the best results. We're looking for one way to proceed and that we can replicate to obtain an expected result. Basically, we have many problems, but we're always looking for one formula. Well, simply put, we're learning to censor our creative self and to only offer one valid, proven solution. So what I want you to think about today is this notion of divergent thinking. So this is a thought process that is aimed at generating ideas wherein a large variety of possible solutions to a problem are proposed with the intent to find one that works. It typically occurs in a spontaneous, free-flowing way that encourages emergence in order to expose fresh views and novel ideas. And this is without discussion, without analysis, and without judgment. That's going to be vital to the exercises we do later. So very common examples of divergent thinking are brainstorm and mind mapping. Now, we all think of brainstorm, but very little people actually go through all of the process of brainstorming that will generate the largest number of ideas. Now, I realize that it may seem like I'm saying that one way is better than the other. It's not. They just have a different purpose. If divergent thinking allows you to generate the largest number of ideas, convergent thinking is what will help you narrow down those options to actually make a decision. So you do need both. The problem that a lot of people have is that they focus so much on only finding the one option that they've forgotten that there are a lot of possibilities. So, how do we provoke divergent thinking? It is very easy, really. It's just to concentrate on quantity. And that may seem weird, counterproductive. Why would I just want to do a lot of things if I'm not focused on quality? Well, I'm sorry. It tends to go against the goal that many creators have. We want to find the perfect solution, relying often on intuition and talent. If I'm good, I should be able to find that one perfect solution, right? Well, the danger in doing that is that all of the options that you're not looking at may actually be the stepping stone you need for that optimal result. For example, I actually do have an anecdote. A few weeks ago, I was working with my team. We had a big brainstorm session, and I mean full-day brainstorm session. We had realized through playtests that some of our core mechanics were just too difficult to learn, and we identified that as a problem. During the meeting, one of my colleagues mentioned that he had an idea, but then kind of just decided to drop it because it was too silly. In a lot of other meetings, I would see people just say, well, you know, that's fine, let's move on. Our team decided to never do that. We want to hear absolutely every thought. So we insisted, and funnily enough, it is the solution we decided to go with in the end, and that we're really happy about. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's always going to happen like that. It may, in fact, be a silly idea that you're going to drop, but it could be the one thing that will click, that will lead you to what you actually need. So never forget to have that. So, simply put, why should you concentrate on quantity? So, I've mentioned it a few times again, open new options, but avoid self-censoring. So, when you think of something and you're not sure, we often decide not to mention anything. But if you just write it down without having the pressure of it being perfect, then that will be enough to inspire others and your later self. Reject self-justification. I'm going to come back to this, but that's basically when you want to prove that you were right. That serves nothing. It's not about you being the perfect creator, but what can you bring to a project to evolve? The fact that you were wrong in the past doesn't actually mean that you're bad. Learn to quit. I've heard a few people mention that in the last 3 days, including in our wonderful keynote. We have this idea that quitting is bad. We say that it's impossible to win if you quit, right? But quitting a bad idea will let you find what works. And of course, the notion of sunk cost fallacy. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept. Some nod. So, sunk cost fallacy is the decision to continue with a project or a decision because of past investment, the sunk cost, rather than potential outcome. This is extremely dangerous. A lot of people just decide to continue with something just because we have already put in so much time, so much energy. But this is especially difficult when our investment is emotional. So learn to distantiate yourself from the project that you've made and allow yourself to be wrong. Being wrong, again, isn't a bad thing. So let's move to exercises, because that's the fun part. I'll have you work alone for the first two, and then move on to group exercises, and I hope you're going to have lots of fun with it. So I'm giving you a theme for today, but it's fine if you want to use something else. I've decided to push you to make some racing games. First exercise, you should pick the one that's in front of you. You should all have one. It's called the 30 Circles Challenge. So 30 circles is super easy. I will give you 5 minutes to fill as many of the circles as possible. You should draw, write, whatever works for you. But basically, put out as many ideas as you can find, and don't worry about them being good. At this point, what you want is quantity. So, to your papers, and go. one more minute. Okay, it's not that easy. Um, so the reason why an exercise like this one is limited in time is to force you to go straight to just generating ideas. When you start to think about what you want to write, you already start to critique what you're going to put on paper, and you're already starting to censor yourself. You remove ideas. It gets easier the more time you do this. When I do this with students, and we do that every week, we actually do 2 minutes, and ideas just come to you. Most of them are bad. I mean, but it's totally fine, because those bad ideas will let you find the path that you do want to use. So you can turn that page over. So, super simple. You're already going to start a bit of editing. So, from the circles that you have filled, you will find a lot of similarities, commonalities, and connections. What you can already start to do is just extract those themes that are interesting for you, what you think will drive your potential brainstorm with a team, which, spoiler, is the next step. It's already a time to eliminate some redundancy, or just get a tiny bit more precise with the ideas that you like. Ideally, you would do this in first time on your own, and then with someone else to challenge the ideas. We're going to skip that step today just because of time. So I'm giving you another 5 minutes to kind of look through what you have already on paper and extract the ideas that really resonate with you. Again, go with your intuition. It's not a question of everything being perfect. It's about quantity. 5 minutes.
So what do we end up with? A smaller set of ideas, or a list of commonalities?
Yes, exactly. So from your first idea on your circle, extract commonalities, or it could also be differentiation if that's what resonates with you for sure. But just try to go from just sheer ideas and move them into concepts. One more minute. Okay. So, you'll have more time for the rest and can actually start talking with other people, challenge ideas, and come up with a broader concept. But before we do that, and before I have you start working in teams, some ground rules, please. So for a brainstorm to be truly effective, it is recommended to apply those 9 rules. So they basically come down to be respectful of others and what they say. Stay on topic. Someone's talking about something, don't just go to something else. Write it down if you want to bring it up after. Don't critique, or at least not at this point. We're again in that notion of quantity. We want to have as many ideas as possible on paper. And just go for the silly things. It's fine to be a little eccentric. That's probably what's going to give you like those funny ideas that are going to come, and you can always edit later. So, let's do basically teams per table. I'll have you join your 2 companions just there. We'll start by mind mapping. So mind map is relatively well known. Just show of hand, is it a tool that people use here? Oh, quite a bit. Okay, cool. You can definitely use software for mind maps. Actually, I know that my friend Osama here has asked on Twitter recently what softwares we do use. I personally like Xmind or MindMap. That is integrated into Google Drive, so super efficient, really easy to share. But I still recommend going back to paper. There is something about the immediacy of working on paper that will allow you to just tap into that creativity. It's the notion of automatic writing or drawing that poets have used forever. Just removing the barrier of working on a computer will let you just find more ideas. So, in groups of 2 or 3, I'll have you do a mind map based on the ideas that you have found individually. For those of you who are not familiar with a mind map, this is an example of it. You'll start with one notion that you put in the middle and that you'll want to explore. So you can start with just a simple concept. In our case, would be something like a racing game. But it could be a question or a problem that you really want to delve into. From that starting point, write or draw all of the ideas, all of the concepts that you can come up with. The difference between what you've done before is that you should already start to organize those in themes. So I'll give you more time here because the idea here is to challenge what the others have done. See what you have in common. Do you contradict yourself? And can you start forming an idea of a game? And let's go for about 20 minutes.
I like that. I kind of feel
We could probably continue this for a very long time. We don't have that time today, so we'll just move on. I've already said that to some of you around. So the danger when we're going into an exercise like mind map is that we kind of want to have that great idea already. So a lot, like, we're talking with you all, like, a lot of you had this fully fleshed out idea, and then you're trying to make the little elements fit into that idea, and that's where you risk getting stuck. So mind map is the exact opposite. You want to break it down into the simpler elements that you can change to have an impact on the larger concept, or open it up to different concepts. So you could do mind maps for like 2 weeks, and you'd have still more and more and more items on there. Let's not do that now. So now we're actually going to pick one concept. I know a lot of you wanted to do that. A lot of you already have one in mind. But I'll have you do a funny one. This exercise is not super well known. I like using it a lot. So wishing has the exact intent of just fueling more creativity in your team. The objective is to be as extravagant as possible. You are looking for something that is unattainable. Go for the riskiest, most unusual idea that you can come up with. So you can start with the concept that you had in mind and then just push it to the limit. And then you'll kind of bring it back to something that is more realistic. So the best example I can give you, it's not a game, is if you would ask me what animal I would want to have, I would tell you I want a unicorn. Because clearly. But then of course they don't exist, makes me very sad. But I would settle for a horse. So do this exercise where you push to the extreme for the most extravagant idea you find, and then bring it back to something more realistic. In doing so, you'll identify the elements that are important for your team and for yourself, the ones that you actually want to invest in. So let's go for a little less, about 10, 12 minutes. So continue.
Oh my God.
If you haven't already done so, you should start moving to your horse side. There's only a few minutes left, so you should start doing the second side. One more minute, just 1 minute. Okay, we're gonna stop here for now. So we have one more step before we can hear all of your ideas. So for that last step, I want you to stick with the concept that you've identified. The sixth thinking hat, I don't know if any of you have heard about it before, is an exercise by a physician called Edward de Bono. So the idea is to help you look at your concept through different perspectives. It's intended to help you make decision and see if your concept works. Let's say, for example, you have a very optimistic view naturally. You may tend to ignore potential downfalls. Or on the flip side, if you're very risk averse, you may not be able to see opportunities that arise. So the 6 hats, they force you to move away from your usual thinking and look at things one perspective at a time. And that's what I'll have you do to just gain that rounder perspective to decide what works or doesn't work with your concept. The best example I can give you for in terms of games, it's something like if the logic hat through data and different facts, for example, that you found through playtesting or market research, tells you that your game works. There is a market for it, you should go for it. And then you identify the risk, the obstacle that exists, but your team has the resources to tackle them, so that's fine. But when you start thinking of emotions, no one's excited by the project. That's a project that's likely going to fail. So you probably should go back to the drawing board. Now, going through all the steps that I've had you done today should come way before a prototype. For an indie team especially, but for any team, the objective is to just remove a lot of the investment that you would do if you can find that your project won't work before spending a full year on it and then just deciding to finish it because, you know, we spent a full year on it. That will help you. So take your idea and go through one perspective at a time. So logic, emotions, creativity, caution or dangers, optimism, and process. The process is not super clear for a lot of people, so it's just identifying the planning that is required to do the project. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. So just looking at time, let's do about 15 minutes. And at the end of that, try to have like a one-liner to share with everyone your idea so we can see what everyone came up with. Cool. 2 minutes. Okay. That is the time we have for this because I absolutely want to hear all of your ideas. So we'll start in the front with you. So let's keep it to one-liners because we'll be here all day.
It's a evolutionary game where you're kind of racing to get evolutionary points to create a creature to then machine learn it against an environment to see how well it does to get more points to then put more points into its evolution.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's go around.
So our idea was the idea of you're playing demons who are in charge of trains, who are ferrying souls to the underworld. This is the idea of there's a finite number of souls and whoever kind of gets the most wins, but it's like this crazy like train racing game.
Wonderful.
So we've got, you set up a Chinese zodiac relay team to race through elemental worlds. So you're kind of collecting elements and applying that to your team in a PPV kind of space.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. We have a touching narrative journey through a series of extremely stressful escape rooms in VR.
We have a 4-player co-op pit stop simulator that is physics-based, and you have to get, it's one pit stop team for the entire race, and you get to sabotage any of the cars that you want. And there's one driver that's driving around, and you could do a really good job for them. They have all the info on their car, so they have to communicate with the team as what fix first. But if you want to sabotage them, you can put Coca-Cola in the petrol tank or put a helmet on the wheel or something like that, and you get benefit for screwing around. It's great fun.
So we're making a fashion-based racing game called MIG-W presents Big W Racing.
Fashion's the other thing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so it's racing, and you're scored based on how fashionable you are at the end. So you race through clotheslines to collect clothing on your body. So you're not actually a car. Sorry, you're just a body floating in a kind of like planking, basically.
So our game is a comedic old people racing game where you're driving around on mobility scooters or going with walking frames at 100 kilometers an hour. And all the power-ups are things like throwing dentures or just farting for a boost. And we haven't worked out what they're all racing to go to yet. It might be medication, we're not sure.
We ended up with a city builder that you will go around absorbing other cities. We're just worried about getting the licensing for mortal engines.
So we focused on the personal lives of racing cars. So we've come up with a Sims management style game of celebrity racing cars and what they do in their personal life when they're off the track. So if you want to think about how they have babies, that's absolutely fine too.
All right. So we've made a physics-based party game where you race to complete a day of work in an office. Picture things are on fire by the end of the day. You're trying to desperately make spreadsheets, but it's all falling apart.
So we ended up with a fantastical musical world wherein you play a crooked bookie who is rigging races using voice commands. So you'd be sitting by the sidelines and you'd tell someone to, spill the oil or drop the bass. So that's what we ended up with.
Okay, so we're aiming for a Nintendo Switch release with motion controls. So it's very important that you think of the motion controls like this. Baby racing. You're racing little babies with a deep lore behind it. They'll be babbling, but the subtitles will be really intense.
Okay, so we came up with a multiplayer game where you play as a future sci-fi tech wizard who creates custom mutant space griffins to steal eggs from each other.
So we came up with like a fashion animal racing game where you basically can customize your animal's outfit, but you can only put them in very ill-fitting costumes, which then affect their ability to use the vehicles.
We ended up with a comedic, roguelike, apocalyptic, capitalistic game where a yearly race determines the economics of the world. You gain sponsors by how you race and then gain endorsements from like global corporations every year based on your actions. And based on your actions, those corporations get stronger and the world gets weaker. And the goal is to try and not get bankrupt, but also don't destroy the world by like giving the like specific sponsors too much like power. By for some reason you are the racer that can control the economics of the world. Yeah.
All right, so we've got a game where aliens try to assimilate into humanity by being faster and better at everyday tasks than all the other humans. And so this can include things ranging from patting pets to planting trees, growing your garden, and all other sorts of fun things like cooking and cleaning. But they do it faster and better. And so they do this all while hiding their secret goals and ulterior motives. And so you try and meet these secret objectives along the way, and then eventually you take over.
Okay, we had an idea for a game where you're gathering a swarm of 30 to 50 wild hogs in up to 3 to 5 minutes to assault a gun-toting father protecting his children. Jiggle bones and physics are key. You basically rampage around this map trying to free clusters of hogs to add to your swarm until you finally like rampage through this central house in the middle of the map.
Ours is a bit more depressing than that. We've got a post-apocalyptic city where you race to safe locations with zombies chasing you with a time crunch so that you can collect items to help rebuild society before it's too late.
So we've got an asymmetrical game where you play as, or one player plays as the racer going down a path, but they're only able to look in their mirror. So they face their mirror to see what's going ahead of them, but they can't see actually what's ahead of them. And the other person controls both the path and the obstacles on it and what effects the mirror has. So the mirror could be like wobbling, or it could have fog, or things in the mirror could be larger than they appear.
Well, thank you very much. Those are all wonderful, fabulous, crazy ideas. We do have time, about 10 minutes for questions, if you have any. Or I'm very happy to have a chat after the presentation's over. Oh, Jake.
From your experience, do you have any recommendations how often it could be good to kind of go through this whole process, or even part of this process, like the 6 thinking hats, as through a regular development process?
So I go through all of that process and even more and longer at the very beginning of any project, and also any important steps that we reach. Especially when we want to introduce a new feature, or if we're looking at a new market. for example. The thinking hat I tend to use like in my life every day. Once you start to kind of absorb that way of breaking down perspectives, it's hard to just stop doing it. And I find that it's helpful to kind of identify what makes you like either tick or just be uncomfortable with something, because you're more sure of what perspective is actually affected. So sometimes you're just like, I don't know why this feels wrong, and just taking the time to like break it down and going through these exercises will help you like just make a decision, basically. So I will do that whenever I feel stuck, basically. Well, thank you very much. And